In the previous videos, I explained exactly why you want to take the time to pre-read before you technically read. And I explained the specific strategy of previewing, which involves walking around the perimeter of the text you're about to read before reading from first to last word. Now, using our sample passage again, I want to show you how to put into practice the next set of pre-reading strategies, skimming and scanning. By the way, as we restart now, I think you'll see how the previewing work that we did in the previous video has provided us with a good sticky layer to hold what we want to pick up now. One common method to start off the skimming process is to carefully read the intro paragraph of the text, word for word. And then, after that, relax your gaze and let your eyes drift and fall here and there through the pages, just loosely scanning, taking in random little artifacts. Let's do that with our sample text and see how it feels. Okay, so I noticed the word knowledge coming up again and again. Seems like a motif. I'm already alert to structure, so my eyes almost automatically stop for a moment when the word pops up. I'm seeing the mind structures knowledge. Structured sets of patterns. This should be a relatively quick stage and a relatively relaxed one. Here and there I might focus with more conscious attention, but mostly I'm just letting my eyes drift. You'll find that when you do this, even the less attentive parts of your skimming have somehow made you much better primed for when you go back to the top and start the comprehensive reading stage. As you skim, you can also keep an alert out for phrases that act as turn signals. Words and phrases like moreover, consequently, the classics, and also, for this reason, following from this, as a result, in brief, with this in mind, on the one hand, and on the other hand, importantly, not only that, but after, next, and more such juicy transitional phrases. Notice what turns are taken and where those turns turn up. That way, in the next phase of your reading, when you dig into the words from the beginning, you'll read knowing, for example, that the argument the author seems to be building on page 3 and 4 is going to get reversed on page 5, or that a concept that the author turns towards on page 6 is actually just a digression because the author will be turning back out of that subtopic on page 7. Okay, next strategy. Read just the intro paragraph. This way, while you read, you'll find that you can start making predictions about what the topic really is and what questions the author is trying to answer about the topic. Students are always talking about information when they refer to what they are learning. After all, this is the information age. It's a snap to find people's phone numbers, the capitals of countries, the years of events, etc. At this point, we might start thinking that the author is going to continue with the topic of information, and that maybe the topic more broadly labeled is how information is so easy to access today. But we can avoid getting misdirected here because we can bring in what we learned from our previewing to refine this prediction. We know this text is going to relate to teaching and to learning and to structure. So even though I still don't know what the author means by structure yet, I can guess that the main topic of this text is not going to be information's new accessibility. So now I can recognize the stuff in this intro is just a hook. In fact, we can probably speed through it because remember, we have a particular question in mind, an answer to look out for. We're keeping alert for the moment when the author will tell us what is structure. So let's continue. It's a snap to find people's phone numbers, the capitals of countries, the years of events, etc. But, yes, we get to the next line and we have that but, that turn in the road away from the thing that is not the topic, information, and as I'm now anticipating, towards the real topic. Okay, but all of these are only facts, isolated bits of information that do not add up to any generalizations or conclusions about the way the world works. And that was the intro, for this short passage, that is. When you're reading longer articles, sometimes the intro might be seen as the first few paragraphs and not just the very first one. By the way, instead of reading the intro first, you may sometimes want to read the concluding paragraphs as your first launching point. And then you'll skim the whole of the text from there. You can actually skim backwards through the pages. Or after reading the concluding paragraph, you can turn back to page 1 and skim forwards from there. The intro and the conclusion are both sections where key information and key vocabulary are usually directly centered. So even though you may not understand everything that's going on in those sections when you're reading them in isolation at this skimming stage, if you've read the intro or the conclusion section first and then scanned the whole, then when you start reading word by word, page by page, you'll find that you have actually developed a sense of judgment you'll be able to use really well. So we did that. We read the subheading, we skimmed the rest loosely, and we read the intro word for word. Though that word for word reading was still in the mode of gathering frame, we weren't yet trying to fully track all the content. So now we begin scanning. The strategy I'm going to use now is to read just the first or the last lines of some of the paragraphs. Remember, I'm not reading yet. I'm just looking to understand what topics exist here and maybe notice a few things I don't even know how to look for yet. So read the bolded words for yourself. I'll be quiet for a moment. And now let's test out what reading partially here has done. Within these discontinuous bits that my eyes just flitted over, I noticed that information and knowledge makes up a pair of contrasted terms. But all these are only facts, isolated bits of information that do not add up to any generalizations or conclusions about the way the world works. What isn't so available is knowledge. I'm noticing that information is colored negatively, while knowledge seems like the positive side of the coin, right? Information is everywhere, it's cheap. Knowledge is rare, it's valuable. I don't exactly know what that is going to mean, but this is enough to help me anticipate a little about where the author is going from here. And having something to anticipate will also help me pay attention. While I'm still wondering what structure is and when it'll show up, I'm also hoping the author will give us an explicit, clear definition of knowledge, because I'm wondering, since it isn't information, what is it? And actually, I'm going to use my reader's judgment and read a bit more right here rather than skim further, because this is the moment that the author is introducing what seems like that key term, knowledge. So, what isn't so available is knowledge, that is, organized bodies of knowledge, which is what we academics have to offer that information-packed websites do not. That's a clue that we're being given a synonym or definition, right? Like if I said, my home, that is the house I live in with my family, is right over here. That is tells you that the second chunk of what I'm saying is just an alternative way of describing the first chunk. It's a definition. And definitions are the kinds of things we want to pay attention to in our skimming and scanning process, even if all we do with them for now is put an asterisk or the letters DEF in the margins as a flag for when we return there later. Okay, so we've learned that knowledge is, in some sense, the same thing as organized bodies of knowledge. We can even chart this out. And though it might seem a bit strange to create a chart with this relatively accessible and short text, actually sketching out this kind of simple chart can sometimes be a really helpful way to anchor some of the distinctions and patterns that you might observe floating by. After having done this charting, going back to the first line of the first paragraph, I suddenly understand something more clearly. Students are always talking about information when they refer to what they are learning. When they refer to what they are learning, this is the question. What are students learning? Obviously, what students are learning is not what they think it is. I'm putting that in my back pocket. As I scanned, by the way, I might also have noticed other kinds of structures, schemas, or patterns. Maybe I noticed that there's something old being compared to something new, that something's preferred compared to something dispreferred. Something's here, something's there. You can sketch out a chart of any kind of binary category that you notice, so that as different concepts are centered paragraph by paragraph, you can keep track of how they overlap or contrast or connect. I put these clues in my back pocket and I move forward, staying in the big picture focus. Remember the great thing about the big picture mode. In this mode, if I'm not quite following what the author is trying to say, I'm fine with that. I'm still just trying to collect clues about what patterns exist across this paper. After we've previewed and skimmed, we will not be able to tell anyone what the article says. We may be able to say what the text is about, but we don't necessarily know the nuanced way this text defines this topic, and we don't know yet what's at stake or why it's convincing. Skimming is not for knowing. Skimming is for prepping your brain, like priming a canvas or reading the map before you start a hike, or looking over a building before exploring its depths. After having previewed, skimmed, and scanned first, when we start reading, we'll find that the little things that we vaguely noticed, things that we didn't even know how to value, will pop up, and we'll be able to see them as, for example, a clue that now tells us that the paragraph we're on is a digression and not something central. Or we'll be able to see a clue that a passage we're looking at is not the author's argument, it's actually a setup, a counter-argument. These kinds of clues will not only give you a sense of judgment to relate to the content, they can also help you regulate your attention, your interest, your patience and your impatience. Having previewed, skimmed, and scanned, you'll have knowledge, for example, of how long it will be before a subtopic wraps up. You'll be able to judge when you can just flit over a part you don't understand and keep moving because you have a clue that the author will be coming back to the same topic later, maybe more comprehensively or more clearly. You'll know that you don't have to stay with one little paragraph and let it be an obstacle. Instead, you'll just skim the part you don't understand, maybe underline a word or phrase that seems important but tricky, and keep moving, because you'll know that you may still be able to understand the whole, even if some parts trip you up. You'll wipe your forehead with the back of your hand and sigh in relief that you successfully fought the temptation to spend 20 minutes on that one passage. Meaning, importantly, the practice of previewing, skimming, and scanning will have helped to establish a habit of moving along, which is a good habit to get into. In short, having kind of scraped up a bunch of clues that solidify and pop up more clearly as you reread through the paper will help you regulate your emotions and your energy, two very important things for your learning. Once you finish reading all or most of the text more closely and want to reread, you can go back to the difficult parts and bring more context to them. And at that point, you'll probably find that what had been very difficult to understand, maybe even felt impossible to understand, has become understandable.